The Dominion's fleets moved like clockwork through the darkness between stars, their hull-mounted plasma cannons gleaming with the promise of swift, efficient destruction. For 7,000 years they had perfected the art of subjugation: identify, isolate, intimidate, integrate. It was a formula that had never failed. Not once, not against the crystal-spined Veltar who could manipulate gravity itself, not against the hive-minded Zerkit who fought with perfect coordination, not against any of the hundreds of species that now served the Dominion with heads bowed and spirits broken. But humanity. Humanity was about to change everything. Fleet Commander Zephyros Kothalan stood motionless before the massive viewing portal of the dreadnought's silent judgment, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional pose of contemplation. His crystalline exoskeleton caught and refracted the pale blue light of the distant star the humans called Sol, casting rainbow patterns across the bridge's obsidian surfaces. Behind him, the bridge crew of 47 beings from 17 different conquered species worked in perfect silence, as all proper military operations should proceed. The blue-white marble that was Earth hung before them like a jewel suspended in velvet darkness. Beautiful, certainly. Primitive by Dominion standards. Absolutely. Third-class gravity well, modest population, limited technological advancement. By every calculation, this should have been routine, a standard 3-day operation. Orbital bombardment, surface landing, surrender negotiations. What Zephyros could not have known, what no being in the galaxy could have anticipated, was that humanity possessed something that transcended all military calculations, all strategic planning, all logical assessment of battlefield capabilities. Humanity possessed a sense of humor that bordered on the psychotic. Fleet Commander, came the melodious tones of his Chief Intelligence Officer, Sub-Commander Lyrian Nethys, her six-eyed serpentine head swaying with nervous energy. Final reconnaissance data from the long-range scouts confirms initial assessment. The humans possess nuclear capabilities, basic space flight, and approximately 8 billion individuals scattered across 7 continental masses. Zephyros nodded slowly, his mandibles clicking in the Dominion equivalent of acknowledgement. Standard resistance projection? Minimal, Fleet Commander. Their weapons technology trails ours by approximately 3,000 years. Their military organization appears chaotic at best. We identify 195 separate nation-states, many of which appear to be in active conflict with one another. Lyrian's serpentine form coiled tighter around her command station. They fight each other more than any external threat could ever motivate them to fight us. From across the bridge, Chief Tactical Officer Brahaven, a massive stone-like being whose species had been conquered 4 centuries prior, rumbled his agreement. His voice carried the weight of mountains when he spoke. Their orbital defenses are laughably primitive. Fleet Commander, metal tubes that launch chemical explosives. We could neutralize their entire military infrastructure with conventional weapons in under 6 hours. Zephyros felt the familiar satisfaction that came with a well-planned operation. Clean, efficient, decisive, exactly as the Dominion preferred. Very well. Signal the fleet. Standard peacekeeping deployment. We begin the liberation operation at dawn. Local time. Across their largest population centers. Minimal casualties. Maximum psychological impact. He turned from the viewing portal, his 4 arms spreading in the gesture of final commitment. Around him, the bridge crew began the practiced choreography of interstellar conquest. Weapons systems hummed to life. Communication arrays focused their signals toward the primitive planet below. Troop transport bays filled with the sounds of soldiers preparing for routine occupation duty. What Zephyros could not see, what his sensors could not detect, his intelligence could not analyze, his experience could not prepare him for, was happening in a small communications bunker buried 300 feet beneath the Colorado Rockies. Colonel Jackson Rivers had been monitoring deep space transmissions for 15 years. 15 long, quiet years of listening to the cosmic background radiation, cataloging asteroid movements, and filing reports that nobody in the Pentagon ever read. His coffee had gone cold hours ago again, and his back ached from hunching over the same worn console that had been scheduled for replacement since the Clinton administration. He was not expecting to detect the largest alien fleet in galactic history appearing at the edge of his solar system. Jesus Christ on a pogo stick, he whispered, his weathered hands flying across the keyboard as readings that should have been impossible filled his screen. Nancy? Nancy? Get in here! Technical Sergeant Nancy McDonald burst through the bunker door, her red hair wild from running down the underground corridor. She took one look at Jackson's face, pale as winter moonlight, and her coffee mug slipped from numb fingers. Jack, what the hell? Look at the screen, Nance. His voice carried the kind of calm that only came with complete shock. Tell me what you see. Nancy leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the radar display that showed dozens of massive signatures arranged in perfect military formation just outside Pluto's orbit. For a moment the bunker fell silent except for the eternal humming of life support systems and the soft clicking of keyboard keys. That's... Nancy's voice trailed off. She blinked hard, rubbed her eyes, looked again. That's not possible. Nope. Jackson leaned back in his chair, which protested with a squeak that had been irritating him for 3 years. But there it is anyway. 47 ships, each one roughly the size of Manhattan, arranged in what appears to be an invasion formation. Nancy was already reaching for the red phone, the one that connected directly to NORAD, the Pentagon, and half a dozen other places that dealt with situations that weren't supposed to exist. We need to call this in. Right now. Wait. Jackson held up one hand, his eyes fixed on the communication array readouts. They're trying to talk to us. What? They're broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. English, Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic. Looks like they've got translation capabilities. Jackson's fingers danced across the controls, isolating the signal. Let's see what they want. The voice that filled the bunker was deep, melodious, and utterly alien, yet somehow familiar, like an echo of authority that transcended species. When it spoke, it carried the weight of galactic civilizations and the confidence of 7,000 years of unquestioned victory. People of Earth, I am Fleet Commander Zephyros Court Talon of the Galactic Dominion. Your world has been selected for integration into our peaceful coalition of civilized species. Resistance is not only futile, it is unnecessary. Surrender your military forces within 72 Earth hours, and your transition to Dominion citizenship will proceed smoothly and without significant casualties. The transmission continued with details about staging areas, surrender protocols, and the benefits of Dominion membership. Jackson and Nancy listened in stunned silence as alien voices calmly discussed the occupation of Earth with all the emotion of a corporate merger announcement. When it finally ended, Jackson slowly reached for his own red phone. But before he could dial, Nancy grabbed his wrist. Jack, she said, her voice strange and tight. Did you hear what that alien commander said? About resistance being futile. Yeah, Nancy. Pretty standard invasion rhetoric, I'd guess. Nancy's grip tightened on his wrist. And when she spoke again, there was something in her voice that Jackson had never heard before. Something dangerous. That's exactly what my ex-husband used to say. Within 6 hours, the news had spread through human communication networks like wildfire through dry grass. Every television station, every radio broadcast, every internet forum buzzed with the impossible truth: humanity was about to be invaded by aliens who expected them to surrender without a fight. The Galactic Dominion, in their 7,000 years of flawless conquest, had made their first critical error. They had assumed that humans, like every other species they had encountered, would approach the situation with logic, self-preservation, and rational fear. They had never encountered a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the invention of both reality television and social media. By developing the most sophisticated psychological defense mechanism in the known galaxy, the ability to find absolutely everything hilarious under the right circumstances. In Dublin, Ireland, Patrick O'Brien watched the alien transmission from his local pub and immediately declared it the best bloody comedy sketch he'd seen since Monty Python. Within an hour, he had written 17 different response jokes and posted them on social media with the hashtag #AlienDadJokes. In Tokyo, Japan, Kenji Nakamura live-streamed his reaction to the invasion announcement while dressed as Godzilla, asking his viewers whether the aliens wanted to schedule their monster movie appearance for Thursday or Friday because he had plans for the weekend. In São Paulo, Brazil, Maria Santos organized what she called an alien welcome party, complete with banners reading Earth, the universe is Florida, And we hope you brought beer. But it was in a small town in Montana where humanity's response to galactic conquest truly began to take shape. Sheriff Tom Bradley had been dealing with the strange and inexplicable for 23 years. Cattle mutilations that turned out to be insurance fraud. UFO sightings that turned out to be experimental military aircraft. Crop circles that turned out to be college students with too much time and too much alcohol. He was not prepared for genuine aliens landing in his jurisdiction and expecting to be taken seriously. The Dominion Advanced Scout ship touched down in Miller's Field at precisely 6:47 a.m. local time, its sleek silver hull gleaming in the morning sunrise. Sheriff Bradley arrived 19 minutes later, driving his battered patrol car down the dirt road that had been used mainly by teenagers looking for places to drink beer and contemplate life's mysteries. He parked next to the alien vessel, which was roughly the size and shape of a city bus, if city buses were made of impossibly smooth metal that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of observation, and climbed out with the slow deliberation of a man who had learned that rushing toward the unknown usually resulted in embarrassment, paperwork, or both. The ship's loading ramp descended with a soft pneumatic hiss, and 3 figures emerged. They were magnificent in their alienness. The leader stood 7 feet tall on 4 legs, his body covered in what appeared to be natural crystal armor that refracted sunlight into dancing rainbows. His 4 arms moved with fluid grace, and his large, multifaceted eyes surveyed the Montana landscape with obvious superiority. Sheriff Bradley took one look at the impressive alien delegation, adjusted his hat, and called out, "Morning! You boys got a permit for that landing?" The lead alien, Submander Tharix Velthan, though Sheriff Bradley would never learn to pronounce the name correctly, stopped mid-stride. In 7,000 years of galactic conquest, no one had ever asked the Dominion for a permit. "I've fought." Tharix's translator rendered his confusion in perfect English. "Landing permit," Sheriff Bradley repeated, walking closer with his hands resting casually on his gun belt. Federal Aviation Administration requires permits for all aircraft operations in United States airspace. That includes alien spacecraft. I'd imagine. Haven't seen the paperwork come through the office? Tharix's 4 arms spread in what his species considered a gesture of obvious authority. "We are representatives of the Galactic Dominion. We do not require permits from primitive species." Sheriff Bradley nodded thoughtfully. "Well, that's where we might have a problem, friend. See, you can call us primitive all you want. Hell, my wife calls me worse than that every morning, but you're still operating an unauthorized aircraft in restricted airspace." The 2 other aliens, both smaller, insectoid creatures whose chittering represented either communication or nervous laughter, exchanged what could only be described as bewildered glances. "Do you understand," Tharix said slowly, "that we represent a military force capable of reducing your entire planet to radioactive dust?" "Oh, sure," Sheriff Bradley replied, pulling out his citation book. "But you're still going to need that permit. Now I can write you up for unauthorized landing, or we can walk over to the town hall and get this sorted out proper-like. Betty at the permit office opens up at 9. For the first time in his military career, Submander Tharix Velthan found himself completely speechless. His advanced tactical training had prepared him for armed resistance, suicide attacks, desperate last stands, and every form of military opposition the galaxy had ever produced. Nobody had trained him for bureaucracy. The Tharix struggled to find words that his translator could handle. "This is not how conquest is supposed to proceed." Sheriff Bradley shrugged. "Maybe not, but it's how Montana works. You want to invade the planet? You follow local regulations. That's just common courtesy." From the alien spacecraft, a communication device chirped with incoming signals. Tharix activated it with one crystalline hand, and the voice of Fleet Commander Zephyros filled the Montana morning air. "Subcommander, report. Have the humans acknowledged our superiority and begun surrender negotiations?" Tharix looked at Sheriff Bradley, who was now methodically writing out what appeared to be a very official-looking citation. The other 2 aliens had begun backing toward their ship with the universal body language of beings who suddenly wished they were anywhere else. "Fleet Commander," Tharix said carefully, "we may have encountered an unexpected complication." "Explain." "The humans appear to be—well, sir, Etherics watched Sheriff Bradley tear off the citation and approach with a friendly smile. They appear to be treating our invasion as a minor administrative inconvenience. The comm channel fell silent for a long moment. Then Fleet Commander Zephyros's voice returned, carrying a note of confusion that had not existed in Dominion communications for 7 millennia. "Come again, Sub-Commander?" Sheriff Bradley reached the aliens and held out the citation with the patient courtesy of a man who had written thousands of tickets over his career. "Here you go, son. Unauthorized aircraft operation, 80/50, you can pay by cash, check, or credit card. There's also information on the back about how to contest the citation if you think it was issued in error." Derek stared at the piece of paper as if it were an incomprehensible artifact from a vanished civilization. Which, in a way, it was. He began. "And like I said," Sheriff Bradley continued, "Daddy opens the permit office at 9. You'll need to bring identification, proof of insurance, and a completed Form FAA 8136. Fair warning. The insurance might be tricky since you're not from around here, but Betty's pretty creative when it comes to paperwork. She once got a permit for a time traveler who claimed to be from a time traveler," one of the insectoid aliens chittered. "Turned out to be my nephew Danny having a psychotic episode, but the paperwork was still valid." Sheriff Bradley tipped his hat. "Welcome to Earth, boys. Hope you enjoy your stay." He turned and walked back to his patrol car, leaving 3 members of the most powerful military force in galactic history standing in a Montana field, holding a traffic citation and wondering what the hell had just happened to their invasion. The footage went viral within hours. Someone in the growing crowd of onlookers had live-streamed the entire encounter, and by noon the video of Sheriff Tom Bradley calmly writing a citation for the Galactic Dominion had been viewed 47 million times. The hashtag #MoPermit2Invade was trending worldwide. Late-night comedians were already writing material, but it was the response from the Dominion fleet that truly launched what would become known as the most bizarrely one-sided conflict in galactic history. Fleet Commander Zephyros stood in his command center, studying reports that made no sense within any framework of military experience he possessed. His intelligence officers, representing the accumulated tactical knowledge of 7,000 years, sat in bewildered silence as data streamed in from advanced teams across the globe. "Status report from Advanced Team Sigma," Sub-Commander Lyrian announced. Her serpentine form coiled tighter than usual around her command station. They landed outside a major population center called New York City and attempted to establish command presence. The human responded by asking if they were part of a television show and demanded to know where the cameras were hidden. And Team Gamma? Similar results from their location designated Los Angeles. The humans assumed they were elaborate movie props and began taking photographs. Several humans asked for autographs. Chief Tactical Officer Brathen's stone-like features somehow managed to convey bewilderment. "Fleet Commander, I have preliminary reports from 17 other landing sites. The pattern is consistent. The humans appear to be responding to our invasion with entertainment." Zephyros felt something he had never experienced in 4 decades of military service: complete tactical confusion. "Explain." Lyrian consulted her readouts with the expression of someone reading a technical manual written by hallucinating poets. "Several humans have organized what they call alien invasion parties. They are consuming alcohol, playing music, attempting to teach our ground teams something called the Macarena." "The what?" "According to our cultural analysis algorithms, it appears to be a form of rhythmic physical expression that—" "Never mind." Zephyros raised one crystalline hand. "What about their military response?" "That's more complicated, Fleet Commander." Lyrian's 6 eyes focused on different data streams simultaneously. "Their military forces are mobilizing, but not in any pattern we recognize. Instead of massing for defensive positions, they appear to be setting up infrastructure, food service stations, portable restroom facilities, merchandise booths selling items with phrases like 'I survived the alien invasion and my planet was invaded and all I got was this lousy t-shirt.'" The bridge fell silent, except for the eternal humming of shipboard systems and the distant sound of Zephyros's worldview cracking like overstressed metal. "Sir," Chief Communications Officer Weltharn, a being whose species communicated through color-changing skin patterns, announced with swirling hues of uncertainty. We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It appears to be an official response from their planetary leadership. Put it through. The voice that filled the command center was warm, slightly amused, and carried the distinctive accent of someone from the American Midwest. When it spoke, it did so with the confidence of a leader who had dealt with difficult situations before, but never quite like this one. This is President Harrison calling for whoever's in charge up there. First off, welcome to Earth. Hope you're finding our little planet hospitable. Second, we've been talking with our folks down here and we've got a proposition for you. Zephyros straightened, his forearms coming to attention. Finally, proper diplomatic contact. Now, we understand you're here on some kind of military operation, and we respect that. Military folks got a job to do, same as anyone else. But here's the thing. Invading planets is expensive, time-consuming, and frankly, it's been done to death in the movies. So we'd like to suggest an alternative approach. Alternative approach? Zephyros found himself speaking aloud. We propose a competition. Best of 3 challenges. Winner takes all. You win, we'll discuss terms for, well, whatever it is you were planning to do with us. We win, you pack up and find somewhere else to invade. Fair enough? The bridge crew exchanged glances that transcended species barriers. In 7,000 years of galactic conquest, the Dominion had received surrender offers, desperate pleas for mercy and defiant declarations of war to the death. No one had ever challenged them to a game. We know you folks are advanced and all, but we figure competition is pretty universal. Plus, it'll be more fun than all that shooting and dying. What do you say? The transmission ended, leaving the most powerful military force in the galaxy staring at their instruments in complete bewilderment. Fleet Commander, Lyrian ventured after several moments of silence. What are your orders? Zephyros looked out at the blue-white marble of Earth, where 8 billion humans were apparently preparing to treat galactic conquest as a sporting event. His strategic training told him to ignore the ridiculous offer and proceed with standard occupation protocols. But something else, something that had been dormant in Dominion thinking for 7 millennia, stirred in the back of his mind. Curiosity. Signal the human leadership, he heard himself saying. Tell them we accept their challenge. The announcement that humanity had challenged the most powerful military force in galactic history to what amounted to an interspecies game show sent ripples of disbelief through every communication network on Earth. But instead of panic, instead of despair, instead of the mass hysteria that every disaster movie had predicted, humanity began placing bets. In London, bookmakers established odds for the competition. Earth favored 3-2, mostly due to home field advantage. In Las Vegas, the Bellagio created an entirely new wing dedicated to extraterrestrial gaming. The International Olympic Committee issued an emergency statement declaring that any interplanetary competition would fall under their jurisdiction and demanding representation on the planning committee. But it was in the small Montana town where the invasion had begun that the true scope of humanity's response became clear. Sheriff Tom Bradley found himself appointed as Earth's official liaison to the alien delegation, a job he accepted with the same patient resignation with which he had accepted every other strange responsibility that had landed in his lap over the past 2 decades. So let me get this straight, he said, sitting across from Submatter Therex in Mabel's Diner, the only restaurant in town large enough to accommodate a 7-foot crystalline being. Your entire species specializes in conquering other planets, and you've never lost a single war in 7,000 years. Correct, the Frix replied, carefully manipulating a coffee cup with one of his 4 hands. The local beverage was growing on him, despite its primitive preparation methods. And now you're about to compete in 3 contests against a species that hasn't even figured out how to stop arguing with itself about climate change. Also correct. Sheriff Bradley nodded thoughtfully, sipping his own coffee. You realize we're probably going to cheat. Verix's multifaceted eyes focused sharply on the human. Cheat? Oh, nothing personal. It's just what we do. We're competitive. We're sneaky. And we have a long history of finding loopholes in rules that other folks thought were pretty straightforward. Sheriff Bradley shrugged. Fair warning and all. The Dominion has contingencies for all forms of deception and trickery. I'm sure you do. But let me ask you something. In all those 7,000 years of conquest, Did you ever invade a planet where the locals responded by organizing a potluck dinner? Brooks was forced to admit that they had not. Well, that's what Martha Henley is doing over at the community center. She's making her famous 3-bean casserole and inviting your whole crew. Says it's the neighborly thing to do. Sheriff Bradley finished his coffee and signaled Mabel for the check. Point is, I don't think your contingencies cover what you're dealing with here. Outside the diner's windows, the sleek silver forms of Dominion aircraft shared parking space with pickup trucks, farm equipment, and one rusted Volkswagen van that had been painted with flowers sometime during the Carter administration. Alien beings in crystalline armor stood in groups with local farmers comparing notes on atmospheric composition and soil quality. It was, Therix realized, the most surreal military deployment in galactic history. Sheriff Bradley, he said carefully, may I ask why your species is responding to invasion with hospitality? The human laughed, a sound that Tharix was learning to recognize as distinctly dangerous in its apparent harmlessness. Son, we're not being hospitable, we're being strategic. See, there's something you folks might not understand about humans. Which is? Sheriff Bradley stood up, left a $5 tip for Mabel, and headed for the door. But before leaving, he turned back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We really hate being told what to do. The first challenge was announced 72 hours later, broadcast simultaneously across Earth's communication networks and the Dominion Fleet's command channels. It would be a test of intelligence. Fleet Commander Zephyros had chosen the challenge personally, confident that the Dominion's advanced understanding of mathematics, physics, and tactical analysis would provide an insurmountable advantage. The contest would involve solving a series of complex problems that drew from multiple scientific disciplines, requiring both raw computational ability and creative thinking. The Dominion would be represented by their finest strategic minds, Sub-Commander Lyrian Nethys, whose serpentine species possessed eidetic memory and parallel processing capabilities, Chief Science Officer Morvac Thulden, whose crystalline neural networks could perform calculations that would overwhelm quantum computers, and Senior Analyst Kithara Voss, whose hive mind heritage allowed access to the combined intellectual resources of her entire species. Humanity would be represented by a retired game show host, a crossword puzzle champion, and a 12-year-old girl from Wisconsin. This is not going to end well, President Harrison muttered, watching the coverage from the Oval Office as the two teams took their positions in what had been hastily designated as the competition arena, a converted aircraft hangar at Edwards Air Force Base that now bristled with cameras, communication equipment, and the largest collection of alien technology ever assembled on Earth. Actually, sir, his chief of staff replied, studying the betting odds on his tablet, the American public has put money down at a ratio of 4-1 in our favor. Based on what possible logic? Based on the fact that the 12-year-old is named Emma Rodriguez. She's won 3 consecutive national mathematics competitions. She's fluent in 6 programming languages, and according to her social media profile, she's been preparing for exactly this scenario since she was 8 years old by playing every strategy game ever invented. President Harrison looked at the screen, where Emma Rodriguez sat calmly between her adult teammates, wearing a t-shirt that read, "Came here to chew bubblegum and beat aliens, and I'm all out of bubblegum. God help us all," he whispered. The first problem appeared on screens visible to both teams and the estimated 2 billion humans watching the live broadcast. A complex equation involving multidimensional calculus, quantum mechanics, and what appeared to be theoretical mathematics from at least 3 different scientific disciplines. The Dominion team huddled together, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and color changes as they began their analysis. Emma Rodriguez read the problem once, tapped her pencil against her lips for exactly 3 seconds, and wrote down the answer. "That's impossible," Submander Lyrian hissed, her serpentine form coiling tighter as she double-checked her calculations. Emma looked up from her paper. "Is it wrong?" Chief Science Officer Morvac checked his crystalline computation array, cross-referenced the data through 17 different analytical frameworks, and reluctantly announced, "No, it is correct." Cool. Emma went back to her bubblegum. The second problem was even more complex. A strategic scenario involving resource allocation, population management, and military logistics across multiple star systems. The Dominion team attacked it with the methodical precision that had served them well across 7 millennia of conquest. The retired game show host, Bob Jenkins, studied the problem for roughly 30 seconds, then wrote down a solution that not only addressed all the parameters but did so with an efficiency rating that exceeded Dominion military standards by 12%. How? Senior analyst Kithera demanded, her hive-mind consciousness buzzing with confused calculations. 37 years of watching contestants solve problems under pressure, Bob replied with the unflappable calm of a man who had seen everything television could throw at him. Plus, this is basically the same challenge as the lightning round in Pyramid of Champions, except with spaceships instead of household appliances. By the 5th problem, a puzzle involving linguistic analysis, cultural interpretation, and xenobiological research, the crossword puzzle champion Dr. Patricia Wong had begun explaining her solutions before the Dominion team had finished reading the questions. "The key," she said, addressing the bewildered aliens with the patience of a college professor, "is recognizing patterns. You're thinking like conquerors, trying to solve everything through force and hierarchy. But intelligence isn't about power, it's about connection. Every problem is just a crossword puzzle where you have to find how the clues link together." Fleet Commander Zephyros watched the competition from his command center, his forearms clenched in growing frustration as his finest intellectual resources were systematically outmatched by what the humans casually referred to as Tuesday night entertainment. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Actually, sir," Chief Communications Officer Weltharn ventured, his skin patterns shifting to nervous yellow-green, "our analysis suggests it's entirely possible. The humans appear to approach problem-solving from a fundamentally different perspective than any species we've encountered." "Explain." "They treat serious challenges as games, and games as serious challenges. Where we see conquest, they see competition. Where we see hierarchy, they see opportunity. They've spent their entire evolutionary history turning survival into entertainment." On the screen, Emma Rodriguez had just solved a problem involving hyperspace navigation that should have required a team of Dominion engineers 3 days to complete. She had done it during the commercial break while teaching one of the alien analysts how to blow bubblegum bubbles. "Sir," Lyrian's voice came through the communication array, carrying a note of something that sounded suspiciously like panic. "Request permission to withdraw from the competition." "Denied." Zephyros straightened to his full height. "The Dominion does not surrender, ever." "But sir, they're making it look easy." From the competition floor, Emma Rodriguez's voice carried clearly through the audio pickups. "Hey, are we gonna do more math problems? Or can we move on to something challenging?" Challenging. A 12-year-old human had just described advanced mathematical concepts that represented the pinnacle of galactic intellectual achievement as insufficiently challenging. Fleet Commander, Chief Tactical Officer Bravin rumbled from his command position, "Perhaps we should consider alternative strategies, such as immediate orbital bombardment." Zephyros was quiet for a long moment, watching as his finest strategic minds were defeated by beings who treated the defense of their planet as a form of recreational activity. "No," he said finally. "We accepted their challenge. The Dominion honors its commitments." He paused. "Besides, I'm beginning to suspect that orbital bombardment might not work against them either." The final problem of the intelligence challenge was presented with great ceremony. A scenario involving the complete restructuring of galactic civilization to achieve optimal resource distribution, technological advancement, and cultural preservation across 10,000 different species. It was the kind of problem that Dominion strategic planners worked on for decades. The kind of challenge that required not just intelligence but wisdom, experience, and an understanding of complex political and social dynamics that spanned centuries. Emma Rodriguez read it, consulted briefly with her teammates, and submitted an answer that not only solved the immediate problem but included a detailed implementation plan, a timeline for execution, and what appeared to be a constitutional framework for interspecies democracy. She had finished 23 minutes before the time limit expired. "How?" Submander Lyrian asked, her serpentine form practically tied in knots of frustration. "How is this possible?" Emma looked up from her homework. She had started on her algebra assignment after finishing the galactic civilization problem and shrugged. "It's basically the same as organizing a school dance committee, except with aliens instead of teenagers. You identify the stakeholders, figure out what everyone wants, find the compromises that make everybody reasonably happy, and then you build in enough flexibility to handle the stuff you didn't think of. But the complexity, the variables, the centuries of historical precedent. Yeah, but you're overthinking it. Yeah. Emma blew another bubblegum bubble. Most problems aren't actually that complicated once you stop making them harder than they need to be. Dr. Patricia Wong nodded in agreement. The thing about crosswords is that the answer is usually simpler than you expect. The trick is not letting the difficulty of the clues fool you into thinking the solution has to be difficult too. Bob Jenkins, meanwhile, was explaining to Chief Science Officer Morvac how the entire challenge was essentially identical to a bonus round he had once hosted, where contestants had to arrange household appliances in order of energy efficiency while blindfolded. The principles are the same, he said with the confidence of a man who had watched thousands of people solve problems under pressure. You just have to remember that every puzzle has a solution, and the solution usually makes sense once you stop panicking about it. Fleet Commander Zephyros sat in his command chair staring at the competition results displayed on his tactical screen. Complete victory for the humans, not close victory. Absolute, overwhelming, almost casual victory. His finest strategic minds had been defeated by a retirement-age television personality, a woman who solved word puzzles for fun, and a child who was still 3 years away from being old enough to drive a motor vehicle. Sir, Submander Lyrian's voice came through the communication array, sounding hollow with defeat. What are your orders? Zephyros was quiet for a long moment, his forearms folded as he contemplated the most significant military defeat in Dominion history. Proceed to the second challenge, he said finally. Sir, the humans won the intelligence challenge. We still have 2 more opportunities to prove Dominion's superiority. But sir, if they can defeat our finest minds this easily, then we'll have to hope, Zephyros interrupted, that physical prowess and technological capabilities serve us better than strategic thinking did. But even as he spoke the words, Fleet Commander Zephyros felt something he had never experienced in 40 years of military service. Doubt. Not doubt about Dominion's superiority. That was impossible. Doubt about whether Dominion's superiority mattered against an opponent who treated their planet's conquest as an opportunity to show off. The second challenge would test physical capability. It was announced the following morning with great fanfare from both sides, a competition involving strength, speed, endurance, and coordination. The Dominion would field their finest warriors, beings whose physical capabilities had been honed by evolution and enhanced by technology across dozens of different worlds. Humanity would be represented by a professional wrestler, an Olympic gymnast, and a 73-year-old grandmother from Alabama. Now I know we're doomed, President Harrison muttered, watching the morning briefing from his national security team. Actually, sir, his chief of staff replied, scrolling through overnight polling data. The American public's confidence has increased to 91%. International betting markets have us favored 7-1. Based on what? Based on the fact that the 73-year-old grandmother is Edith May Campbell, who holds the Guinness World Record for deadlifting more than twice her body weight, has completed 17 marathons, and according to her interview last night, has been waiting her whole life for the chance to wrestle with aliens. President Harrison looked at the screen, where Edith May Campbell sat in the competitor's area wearing a sequined tracksuit and speaking with reporters. Honey, I've raised 6 children, survived 3 husbands, and run a cattle ranch for 47 years, she was saying, her Alabama accent thick as molasses and twice as sweet. I once chased off a pack of coyotes with nothing but a rolling pin and pure determination. These alien folks might be advanced and all, but I doubt they've ever dealt with an angry grandmother who's had her morning coffee. The competition began with tests of raw strength. The Dominion's first representative was Vorthak Prime, a being whose species had evolved in 3 times Earth's gravity, whose natural exoskeleton could resist armor-piercing rounds, whose forearms could lift a small automobile without strain. The professional wrestler, Jake Thunder Morrison, approached the first challenge, lifting progressively heavier weights until failure with the casual confidence of a man who had spent 20 years entertaining crowds by pretending to be stronger than physics should allow. Except, it turned out, Jake wasn't pretending. 800 pounds, the announcer called as Jake lifted the barbell with a grunt of effort. Personal record for the human competitor. Vorthak Prime stepped up to the same weight, his forearms working in perfect coordination, his alien musculature rippling beneath crystalline armor. He lifted the barbell easily, holding it overhead with obvious superiority. Jake nodded approvingly. Nice form, big guy. Let's see what you've got. The weights increased. 1,000 pounds, 1,200, 1,500. At 2,000 pounds, Vorthak Prime began showing signs of strain. His crystalline armor shifted color, heat radiating from his exoskeleton as his alien physiology pushed toward its limits. Jake lifted the same weight with a theatrical grunt, winked at the cameras and said, "You know, this reminds me of my third match against the Destroyer. Different venue, same basic principle. At 2,500 pounds, well beyond anything that should have been possible for human physiology, Vorthak Prime reached his limit. He stepped back, his forearms trembling with exhaustion, his entire being radiating grudging respect for the human's capabilities. Jake Morrison looked at the weight, looked at his opponent, looked at the cameras and asked, "We going for the record, or what?" He lifted 2,550 pounds, set it down gently and offered to buy Vorthak Prime a protein shake. The speed trials went similarly. Olympic gymnast Rebecca Chen moved with a grace and precision that seemed to bend the laws of physics, her routines incorporating elements that the Dominion's finest athletes couldn't replicate despite advantages in reflexes, coordination and muscle density. But it was the endurance challenge that truly demonstrated the gap between human determination and galactic expectations. Edith May Campbell, 73 years old and weighing perhaps 90 pounds soaking wet, stepped up to face Ketunver, a being whose species could run at speeds approaching 40 miles per hour for distances that would exhaust a racehorse. The challenge was simple, continuous physical activity until one competitor could no longer continue. Ketunver began with a display of speed and grace that drew appreciative murmurs from the human audience. Her form was perfect, her breathing controlled, her pace sustainable for what should have been several hours of competition. Edith May started her exercise routine. It was, by all appearances, nothing more impressive than the kind of aerobics class offered at community centers across America. Step touches, arm circles, gentle stretching, movements that seemed almost comically simple compared to the alien athlete's performance. But Edith May didn't stop. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3. Ketunver began to slow, her perfect form deteriorating as exhaustion set in. Edith May kept going, chatting cheerfully with the competition judges about her grandchildren, her garden and her opinion of the weather. 4 hours, 5, 6. This is impossible, Ketunver gasped. Her alien physiology pushed well beyond its design limits. "Oh, honey," Edith May replied, not even breathing hard, "this is just my morning routine. I usually do this for about 3 more hours, then I start my real workout." 7 hours into the competition, Ketunver collapsed from exhaustion. Edith May Campbell was still going, having moved on to what she described as some light calisthenics to keep things interesting. "Ma'am," the competition judge ventured, "you can stop now. You've won." "Stop?" Edith May looked genuinely confused. "Honey, I'm just getting warmed up. Plus, I promised my book club I'd beat whatever record these alien folks set. They're all watching on television and I don't want to disappoint them." Fleet Commander Zephyros watched the physical competition results with growing disbelief. His finest warriors, beings whose capability has exceeded anything in their databases of conquered species, had been defeated by humans who treated the defense of their planet as a form of recreational activity. "This is impossible," he said for the 3rd time that day. "Sir," Chief Science Officer Morvac reported, his crystalline neural networks humming with frantic calculations, "our analysis suggests that human physiology operates on principles we don't fully understand. They appear to possess psychological enhancement capabilities that allow them to exceed their theoretical physical limitations through sheer determination." Explain. They literally refuse to accept that something is impossible. And somehow that refusal translates into actual physical performance improvements. It's as if their biology responds to their psychology in ways that violate known scientific principles. On the screen, Edith May Campbell was now 9 hours into her light exercise routine, while explaining to a news crew how she planned to prepare dinner for the entire Dominion landing party, because those poor alien boys look half-starved. "Sir, Submander Lyrian's voice carried over the communication array, sounding distinctly shell-shocked. "What are your orders for the final challenge?" Zephyros sat in his command chair, staring at tactical displays that showed the most advanced military force in galactic history being systematically defeated by beings who treated interstellar conquest as an opportunity for friendly competition. "The technology challenge," he said finally. "Our last chance to demonstrate Dominion's superiority." "Sir," Lyrian ventured carefully, "perhaps we should consider that these humans might be different than other species we've encountered." "Different how?" "They don't seem to understand that they're supposed to lose." Zephyros was quiet for a long moment. Outside his command center's viewing ports, Earth hung like a blue jewel in the darkness, beautiful, primitive, and apparently inhabited by beings who had turned planetary defense into a form of entertainment. "Prepare for the final challenge," he ordered, "and signal the Technology Research Division. Tell them to prepare our most advanced systems." "Sir? If we're going to lose to these humans," Zephyros said grimly, "we're going to make them work for it." But even as he spoke, Fleet Commander Zephyros realized that he had just committed the ultimate heresy in Dominion thinking. He had admitted the possibility of defeat, and once that possibility existed, everything changed. The third and final challenge was announced with the kind of pomp and ceremony typically reserved for treaty signings and declarations of war. The test would be technological capability, the one area where Dominion's superiority should have been absolutely unquestionable. The rules were simple. Each team would be presented with a series of technological problems requiring innovation, creativity, and advanced engineering. Solutions would be judged on effectiveness, elegance, and practical applicability. The Dominion would field their finest technical specialists, backed by the accumulated knowledge of 7,000 years of galactic civilization. Humanity would be represented by a software engineer, a mechanic, and a 10-year-old boy who had been building robots out of household appliances since he was 5. "At least this one makes sense," President Harrison said, watching the pre-competition coverage from the Oval Office. "We've got actual technical experts." His chief of staff looked up from his tablet where betting odds were updating in real time. "Actually, sir, the public confidence level has dropped to 63%. "Why?" "Because the 10-year-old is Timothy Chen, no relation to the gymnast, and his last 3 science fair projects were a fully functional hovercraft made from a leaf blower and some aluminum foil, a quantum computer built inside his mom's microwave, and something he calls a universal translator that can apparently decode any language in the universe using nothing but a smartphone app and some creative programming." President Harrison stared at the screen, where Timothy Chen sat in the competitor's area wearing a t-shirt that read, "I void warranties for fun and casually reprogramming what appeared to be an alien communication device." A 10-year-old built a quantum computer in a microwave. According to the patent office, yes, they're still trying to figure out how it works. Timothy's explanation involved a lot of words that don't exist in English and a diagram that made 3 physicists cry. "God help us all," President Harrison muttered. Again, the Dominion's technical team approached the competition with the methodical precision that had served them across millennia of conquest. Chief Technology Officer Zarthil Vex, a being whose crystalline neural networks could process information at speeds that would overwhelm quantum computers, stood 7 feet tall in his polished chrome exoskeleton, flanked by senior engineer Morphic Drell, whose species had invented faster-than-light travel, and technical specialist Ithara 9, whose hive-mind consciousness contained the accumulated engineering knowledge of 17 different civilizations. They looked at humanity's representatives and felt something approaching pity. The software engineer David Park appeared to be taking notes on a napkin. The mechanic, Rosa Valdez, was examining one of the Dominion's advanced plasma rifles with the casual interest of someone checking the oil in a pickup truck, and Timothy Chen was building something that looked like a cross between a television remote and an abstract sculpture using components he had somehow acquired from the competition's staging area. "Poor primitives," Zerservide commented to his teammates, his translated voice carrying the condescension of advanced civilization. "Their technology trails ours by millennia. This should be concluded quickly." The first challenge was presented: design a solution for faster-than-light communication across galactic distances. The Dominion team immediately began constructing a device that represented the pinnacle of their technological achievement, a quantum entanglement communicator that could transmit information instantaneously across any distance by manipulating the fundamental forces of space-time. It was elegant, sophisticated, and drew from thousands of years of scientific advancement. David Park looked at the problem, opened his laptop and began typing. 20 minutes later, he presented his solution. A software application that could piggyback communication signals through existing faster-than-light transportation networks, creating a galactic internet using infrastructure that already existed. But this is impossible, senior engineer Morphic protested, studying David's code. You cannot achieve faster-than-light communication without quantum entanglement or dimensional folding. Sure you can, David replied, still typing. You just have to stop thinking about it as a physics problem and start thinking about it as a networking problem. Every FTL ship is basically a data packet moving through space. All I did was design a protocol that lets them carry messages along with whatever else they're transporting. But the bandwidth limitations, the security protocols, the synchronization requirements, David shrugged. Those are just software issues. Give me another hour and I'll have a beta version you can test. The second challenge involved energy generation and storage. The Dominion team constructed a miniature fusion reactor that could power a small city while fitting in a device the size of a briefcase. It represented the absolute pinnacle of their energy technology. Clean, efficient, and virtually limitless in its potential. Ruza Valdez looked at the problem, walked over to the staging area, and returned with what appeared to be a collection of random mechanical parts. Ma'am, technical specialist Ithara 9 ventured, this challenge requires advanced energy generation technology. Those appear to be primitive machine components. Yep, Rosa agreed cheerfully, connecting components with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent 30 years fixing things that weren't supposed to be fixable. Alternator from a 1987 Chevy, cooling system from an old refrigerator, some copper wire and a few magnets I pulled out of the speakers over there. Within an hour, she had assembled a device that generated more power per unit of mass than the Dominion's fusion reactor. How? Chief Technology Officer Zorthil demanded, his crystalline neural networks running diagnostic cycles that kept returning impossible results. Simple, Rosa said, wiping her hands on a shop rag. Your fusion reactor is trying to contain stellar-level energy in a small space. That's like trying to hold an explosion in a shoebox, complicated, dangerous, and inefficient. This baby just captures ambient energy that's already there and converts it into something useful. But the energy conversion ratios, the thermodynamic efficiency. Yeah, but you're overcomplicating it. Energy's energy. The trick is not fighting physics, it's figuring out how to work with what physics wants to do anyway. The third challenge was the most complex. Design a system for terraforming hostile planets to support life. The Dominion team began constructing atmospheric processors, ecosystem management systems, and geological modification equipment that represented thousands of years of planetary engineering experience. Timothy Chen looked at the problem, looked at the device he had been building throughout the competition and said, "Oh, I already solved this one." You, what? Timothy held up his improvised construction, which had evolved from looking like a television remote to resembling something that might have been designed by an alien intelligence for purposes that defied human understanding. Terraforming is basically just a scaling problem, he explained with the casual confidence of someone who had never encountered a problem he couldn't solve. You don't need to change entire planets, you just need to create localized environmental bubbles that can expand over time, like seeds, but for ecosystems. He activated his device. The air around the competition area shimmered, and suddenly the sterile aircraft hangar environment was filled with the sounds and scents of a lush forest. Plants began growing from the concrete floor. The temperature moderated to perfect comfort. The artificial lighting was replaced by what appeared to be natural sunshine. This is impossible. Technical specialist Uitera gasped, her hive mind consciousness buzzing with confused calculations. Nah, Timothy replied, already making adjustments to his device. It's just environmental programming. Same principle as a video game, except instead of rendering graphics, you're rendering actual reality. The hard part was figuring out how to make the changes stick without constant maintenance. Fleet Commander Zephyros watched the technology competition results from his command center, his forearms trembling with something that transcended military defeat. This was existential crisis. The Dominion's most advanced technology had been surpassed by beings using primitive tools, unconventional thinking, and what appeared to be in complete disregard for the laws of physics. "Sir," Sub-Commander Lyrian's voice came through the communication array, sounding hollow with shock. "The humans they've won. All 3 challenges. Decisively." Zephyros stared at the tactical displays showing impossible results. A species that shouldn't have been able to resist orbital bombardment had just demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded anything in the Dominion's 7,000-year history. "Sir," Chief Science Officer Morvac reported, his crystalline neural networks flickering with overload patterns. "Our analysis of the human solutions suggests that their approach to problem-solving operates on principles we don't understand. They appear to ignore conventional limitations and simply create solutions that work despite violating known scientific principles. That's impossible." "Yes, sir. But they're doing it anyway." On the screen, Timothy Chen was now explaining to a growing crowd of Dominion scientists how his terraforming device worked, while David Park was helping their communications specialists upgrade their FTL networks, and Rosa Valdez was teaching their engineers how to build power generators using whatever junk you've got lying around. The human competitors weren't treating this as a victory over a superior enemy. They were treating it as an opportunity to share knowledge with new friends. "Sir," Lyrian ventured carefully, "what are your orders?" Zephyros was quiet for a long moment, staring at displays that showed the complete failure of everything the Dominion had believed about themselves, about conquest, and about the nature of civilization itself. "Signal the human leadership," he said finally. Request permission to meet with their representatives." "Sir, the humans have won, Sub-Commander. According to the terms of our agreement, we must withdraw and find somewhere else to invade." He paused, "But I find myself curious about what other impossibilities they might achieve." The meeting took place in the same Montana diner where Sub-Commander Thyrix had first encountered human bureaucracy. Fleet Commander Zephyros sat across from President Harrison, Sheriff Tom Bradley, and Emma Rodriguez, who had insisted on attending because, as she put it, somebody needs to make sure the adults don't mess this up. The diner was packed beyond capacity. Alien beings in crystalline armor shared booth space with local farmers. Dominion scientists compared notes with human engineers. Sub-Commander Lyrian was teaching Mabel how to prepare coffee that would be compatible with serpentine physiology. It was, Zephyros realized, the most surreal diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. "So," President Harrison said, sipping his coffee with the casual demeanor of a man discussing the weather rather than the aftermath of an interstellar war, "I guess you folks will be moving on to invade someone else's planet." "Actually," Zephyros replied carefully, "that's what I wanted to discuss with you." Emma Rodriguez looked up from her algebra homework. "You're not going to invade anybody else, are you?" The question was asked with the directness that only children could achieve, cutting through diplomatic niceties to the heart of the matter. Zephyros found himself struggling with concepts that had never existed in Dominion thinking. The Dominion has been conquering planets for 7,000 years. It's what we do. It's who we are. "But why?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. "Because," Zephyros paused, realizing that he had never actually considered the question. "Because that's how civilizations advance, how they grow, how they achieve their potential." "But you haven't grown," Sheriff Bradley observed mildly. "You've been doing the same thing for 7,000 years. That's not growth, that's just repetition." The words hit Zephyros like a physical blow. 7 millennia of conquest. And what did the Dominion have to show for it? They were exactly what they had been at the beginning. A military force that specialized in defeating opponents and imposing order. They had never learned anything new. They had never created anything original. They had never faced a challenge that forced them to grow beyond what they already were. Until now. "What we don't understand," President Harrison continued, "is why you think conquest is the only way to achieve advancement. We've got 7 billion people on this planet who can't agree on what to have for lunch. But somehow we keep coming up with new ways to solve problems. Because you compete with each other," Chief Science Officer Morvac observed, his crystalline form taking up 2 chairs in most of the aisle. Your entire species appears to be engaged in constant competition, forcing continuous innovation and adaptation. Emma Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Exactly. Competition makes everything better. That's why video games have leaderboards and schools have grades and sports have championships. If everybody already knew who was going to win, nobody would bother trying harder. But the Dominion always wins, Submander Lyrian pointed out from her coiled position around a corner booth. We have for 7,000 years. Right, and that's your problem, Emma replied with the brutal honesty of youth. You're not competing anymore, you're just bullying. And bullies never get better at anything because they never have to. Zephyros felt something shift in his understanding, not just of humanity but of the entire structure of galactic civilization. The Dominion had created a galaxy where no one could challenge them, and in doing so they had eliminated the very force that drove advancement. They had conquered themselves into stagnation. What, he asked carefully, would you suggest we do instead? Emma Rodriguez grinned, an expression that Zephyros was learning to recognize as distinctly dangerous in its implications. Well, she said, you could try competing with us instead of conquering us. See who can come up with better solutions to problems. See who can build cooler stuff. See who can help more people. But that would mean Zephyros struggled with the concept. That would mean accepting the possibility of losing. Duh. That's what makes it fun. President Harrison leaned forward. Emma's got a point. You folks are obviously advanced, obviously capable. But you're wasting all that capability on something that stopped being challenging 7,000 years ago. What if you tried applying it to something actually difficult, such as? Sheriff Bradley gestured out the diner's windows, where the strange collection of alien spacecraft and human vehicles continued to share parking space in perfect harmony. Such as figuring out how to build a civilization where everyone gets to compete, everyone gets to grow, and nobody has to get conquered. The conversation continued for hours, moving from the diner to the community center to Martha Henley's famous potluck dinner. Alien beings who had never questioned the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization found themselves discussing concepts that had never existed in their vocabulary: voluntary cooperation, mutual benefit, competitive collaboration. But it was Timothy Chen's demonstration that finally shattered the last remnants of Dominion certainty. The thing is, he explained to a mixed group of human and alien scientists, you've been thinking about this all wrong. You assume that for someone to win, someone else has to lose. But that's only true if you're competing for the same limited resource. He activated his modified terraforming device, which had continued to evolve throughout the day. The community center's interior transformed into something that resembled a three-dimensional holographic display, showing star systems, trade routes, and resource flows across the galaxy. But what if instead of competing for resources, you competed to create them? Timothy continued. What if instead of fighting over planets, you tried to see who could build the most planets? What if instead of conquering civilizations, you tried to see who could help the most civilizations reach their potential? The holographic display shifted, showing scenarios where different species contributed their unique capabilities to shared projects. Dominion military precision combined with human innovation, serpentine analytical ability working with crystalline processing power, hive mind coordination enhanced by individual creativity. It would be, technical specialist Ethira whispered, her consciousness buzzing with calculations, the most complex competitive environment ever conceived. Exactly, Timothy grinned. Way more challenging than conquest. Way more fun, too. Fleet Commander Zephyros stared at the display, watching scenarios unfold that represented possibilities the Dominion had never considered. Challenges that would require everything they had learned over 7 millennia, plus capabilities they had never developed because they had never needed to. Growth, innovation, evolution, competition that made everyone stronger instead of reducing opponents to submission. This is, he began. Impossible? Emma Rodriguez suggested with a smirk. Terrifying, Zephyros admitted. And fascinating. And, he paused, searching for words that didn't exist in Dominion military vocabulary. And the most interesting challenge the Dominion has faced in 7,000 years. The announcement was broadcast simultaneously across Earth's communication networks and the Dominion fleet's command channels. The Galactic Dominion would be withdrawing their invasion force and returning to their home territories. But they would not be resuming their conquest of other worlds. Instead, they would be establishing the first Interstellar Competition Commission, with headquarters on a neutral world to be selected by joint committee. The purpose of this organization would be to facilitate competitive cooperation between species, with challenges ranging from technological innovation to artistic achievement to planetary engineering. Participation would be voluntary. Competition would be ongoing. Everyone would have the opportunity to both win and lose, to teach and learn, to grow beyond what they had been. The prize for winning would not be conquest or domination. The prize would be the chance to compete in even more challenging events. "It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," President Harrison said, watching the announcement coverage from the Oval Office. "Yes, sir," his chief of staff agreed. "The American public approval rating is 97%. Of course it is." On the screen, Emma Rodriguez was being interviewed about her role in preventing an interstellar war. "It wasn't that hard," she was saying, her bubblegum popping occasionally for emphasis. "Adults always make things more complicated than they need to be. The alien guys were bored because they were too good at conquering stuff. So we just had to give them something more interesting to do." "And you think competitive cooperation will work better than military conquest?" "Well, yeah, video games are way more fun when the AI gets smarter instead of just throwing more enemies at you. Same basic principle." President Harrison shook his head in amazement. A 12-year-old girl just restructured galactic civilization using video game logic. "Actually, sir, Emma Rodriguez turned 13 last week. There was a birthday party. The entire Dominion fleet attended. Apparently Sub-Commander Lyrian makes excellent birthday cake." "Of course she does." 6 months later, the first Interstellar Innovation Challenge was held in Earth's orbit. 17 different species competed in events ranging from faster-than-light engine design to artistic interpretation of quantum mechanics to collaborative problem-solving involving theoretical scenarios that had never been attempted. The Dominion won 3 events, placed second in 4 others, and came in dead last in the creative problem-solving under impossible circumstances challenge, which was won by a team consisting of Emma Rodriguez, Timothy Chen, Edith May Campbell, and Sub-Commander Tharix, who had developed an unexpected talent for bureaucratic innovation. Fleet Commander Zephyros watched the competition results from the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Competition Station. His 4 arms folded as he contemplated the most significant change in his civilization's history. They had lost more events than they had won. It was the most energizing experience of his life. "Sir," Submander Lyrian approached, her serpentine form coiled with what he had learned to recognize as excitement. "The humans have proposed the next challenge series." "Oh?" "Terraforming competition. Each species gets a dead world and 1 standard year to see who can create the most impressive biosphere. Winner gets to host the next round of challenges." Zephyros felt something that had been dormant in Dominion psychology for 7 millennia, anticipation of a worthy challenge. "Accepted," he said immediately. "And Lyrian?" "Yes, sir. Signal our research division. Tell them to start studying everything they can about human agricultural techniques, ecosystem management, and—" he paused, remembering Timothy Chen's terraforming demonstration, "and whatever it is they call creative engineering. Sir, our scientists are concerned that human approaches to problem-solving don't follow conventional scientific principles." "Good," Zephyros replied. "If they followed conventional principles, there wouldn't be any challenge in learning from them." Outside the station's viewing ports, 17 different species were already beginning preparations for the next round of competitions. Ships launched toward selected worlds, carrying not weapons of conquest but tools of creation. Scientists worked in mixed species teams, combining different approaches to shared challenges. The galaxy was becoming something it had never been before, a place where advancement came not from defeating others but from everyone becoming better than they had been. And at the heart of it all, humanity continued to treat the most significant transformation in galactic history as an opportunity for friendly competition. 2 years after the day that would become known as the Great Diplomatic Misunderstanding, the galaxy had transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to the civilizations that had existed under 7 millennia of Dominion rule. The Interstellar Competition Commission had grown from a single orbital station to a network of facilities spanning 14 star systems. What had begun as humanity's desperate gambit to avoid conquest had evolved into the most dynamic force for advancement that galactic civilization had ever experienced. And humanity, characteristically, treated their role as cosmic game-changers with the same casual confidence they brought to everything else. "You know," Emma Rodriguez said, now 14 years old and serving as the youngest commissioner in Interstellar Competition Commission history, "I think we might have accidentally created something bigger than we meant to." She was floating in the zero-gravity observation lounge of Competition Station Alpha, looking out at a view that encompassed 17 different architectural styles, 43 species, and what appeared to be a three-dimensional chess match being played with actual spaceships. Timothy Chen, now 12 and the reigning champion of impossible engineering solutions, drifted over from the construction bay where he had been working on his latest project, something he described as a universe simulator but fun. "Vigor how?" he asked, though his attention was mostly focused on the holographic blueprint floating between his hands. "Well, we were just trying to avoid getting invaded," Emma replied, gesturing toward the vast complex of installations that now surrounded them. But look what happened instead. What had happened was unprecedented in galactic history. The first terraforming challenge had resulted in 17 worlds being transformed from barren rock to thriving biospheres, each one a unique expression of different species' understanding of life, beauty, and possibility. The second innovation series had produced technological breakthroughs that advanced entire fields of science by centuries. The third collaborative problem-solving championship had resulted in solutions to resource distribution issues that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. But it was the fourth annual competition, the one that had become known as the Impossible Challenge, that had truly changed everything. Fleet Commander Zephyros, now Director of Competitive Operations for the former Galactic Dominion, reviewed the results of the latest challenge series with something approaching awe. His civilization had spent 7,000 years perfecting the art of conquest, only to discover that they had been thinking about power in entirely the wrong way. True power, it turned out, wasn't the ability to force others to submit. True power was the ability to inspire others to exceed what they thought possible. The results from the Impossible Challenge are unprecedented, Submander Lyrian reported, her serpentine form coiled around a data display that showed statistics that defied conventional analysis. 47 different species submitted solutions to problems that our most advanced theoretical models classified as unsolvable. And how many of those solutions actually work? All of them. Sir, every single one. Zephyros stared at the data, his forearms folded as he contemplated the implications. The Impossible Challenge had been designed by committee, representatives from every participating species working together to create problems that were genuinely unsolvable using conventional approaches. The idea had been to push the boundaries of what competition could achieve, to see if the collaborative competitive model could handle truly intractable challenges. Nobody had expected every team to succeed. "Show me the human solutions," Zephyros requested. "Sir, that's complicated." "How so?" They didn't submit individual solutions. They submitted what they call a solution framework, a method for approaching impossible problems that can be applied to any challenge regardless of its specific parameters. The display shifted to show Emma Rodriguez's presentation to the Impossible Challenge judging committee. At 14, she had developed a confidence that bordered on the supernatural, combined with an analytical capability that made hardened scientists weep with envy. "The thing about impossible problems," her recorded voice explained, "is that they're only impossible if you accept the limitations that define them as impossible. But most limitations aren't actually limitations. They're just assumptions that nobody's bothered to question." The presentation continued with a step-by-step breakdown of how to identify hidden assumptions, reframe problem parameters, and create solutions that worked by changing the fundamental nature of the challenge itself. It was, Zephyros realized, exactly what humanity had done to the Dominion's invasion. They had refused to accept that conquest was inevitable, had reframed the entire situation as a competition rather than a war, and had created a solution that transformed everyone involved into something better than they had been before. "Sir." Chief Science Officer Morvac's crystalline form materialized in the briefing room. his neural networks flickering with excitement. You need to see the latest developments from the Human Engineering Division. What have they done now? They've created a method for solving problems that don't exist yet. The concept was staggering in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Timothy Chen, working with a mixed team of human and alien engineers, had developed what he called predictive solution architecture, a framework for creating solutions to problems that might arise in the future, based on extrapolating current trends and identifying potential challenges before they became critical. It was, essentially, the ability to be prepared for anything. The basic principle, Timothy explained to a gathering that included representatives from 37 different species, is that most problems follow predictable patterns. Wars happen because resources get scarce. Environmental collapse happens because nobody plans for long-term consequences. Social conflicts happen because different groups have incompatible goals. He activated a display that showed complex modeling scenarios, each one representing a different potential future crisis and its corresponding solution set. But if you can model the patterns that lead to problems, you can design solutions before the problems actually happen. And if you can do that, you can prevent most crises from occurring in the first place. The implications were staggering. Species that had spent millennia struggling with resource conflicts could now predict and prevent scarcity before it occurred. Civilizations that had collapsed due to environmental degradation could now model sustainable development paths that maintained prosperity while protecting their worlds. Political systems that had devolved into warfare could now identify and address underlying conflicts before they reached critical points. This is Senior Analyst Cathara's hive mind consciousness buzzed with calculations. This is the end of crisis as a driving force in galactic civilization. No, Emma Rodriguez corrected, drifting over from where she had been reviewing the presentation materials. This is the beginning of crisis as a creative force in galactic civilization. Explain. Simple. Instead of waiting for problems to happen and then scrambling to solve them, we get to invent problems that push us to grow in specific directions. We get to design challenges that make us better at exactly what we want to be better at. The room fell silent as the full implications sank in. They weren't just competing anymore. They were evolving by choice, directing their own advancement toward goals they selected rather than simply responding to whatever crisis happened to arise. It was the ultimate expression of competition, competing against the limitations of what they currently were in order to become what they chose to be. The announcement of the 5th annual competition series sent ripples of anticipation through galactic civilization that had never existed before. The challenge wouldn't be technological innovation or physical prowess or intellectual achievement. The challenge would be to design and implement a better version of galactic civilization itself. 43 species would compete not to prove superiority over others, but to demonstrate their vision of what everyone could become. The winner would be determined not by defeating opponents but by creating solutions that made everyone else want to become better. President Harrison watched the announcement coverage from the Oval Office, his hair now significantly grayer than it had been 3 years earlier. "You realize," he said to his chief of staff, "that we've accidentally turned the entire galaxy into a massive self-improvement program." "Yes, sir. The American public approval rating is 99%. "Of course it is." Harrison shook his head. "What's our domestic team working on for the competition?" According to the latest briefing, they're designing something they call Democracy 2.0, a governmental system that incorporates real-time feedback from citizens, predictive policy modeling, and what Emma Rodriguez describes as government that actually learns from its mistakes. "And they think this will work?" "Sir, at this point I've learned not to doubt anything that involves Emma Rodriguez and the phrase 'this should be easy.'" On the screen, coverage had shifted to interviews with competition participants from across the galaxy. Each species was approaching the challenge from their unique perspective. The former Dominion military focusing on efficient resource allocation and conflict prevention. The Crystalline Veltai working on systems for collective decision-making that preserved individual autonomy. The hive-minded Zarvak developing models for cooperation between radically different forms of consciousness. But it was the human approach that continued to confound everyone else's expectations. "We're not trying to build a better government," Emma Rodriguez explained to the interviewer, her casual confidence now legendary across 17 star systems. We're trying to build a system that makes better people. Can you elaborate on that? Sure. Most governmental systems are designed to control people's behavior through laws and enforcement. But that only works if you assume people don't want to do the right thing. What if instead you designed systems that made it easier and more rewarding to be your best self than to be your worst self? And you think that's possible? Emma's grin was the same expression that had convinced the most powerful military force in galactic history to abandon conquest in favor of friendly competition. Everything's possible. You just have to figure out how to make it fun. The 5th annual competition took place across multiple star systems simultaneously, with each participating species given an entire world to use as a testing ground for their vision of improved civilization. The results defied every prediction. The former Dominion created a society based on voluntary service, where citizens competed for the opportunity to contribute to community projects, and advancement came through demonstrated capability to help others succeed. The Veltar designed a civilization where every individual's unique abilities were identified and developed through personalized education systems, creating a society where everyone excelled at something and no one was redundant. The Zorvikat developed a model that balanced collective consciousness with individual identity, allowing beings to share knowledge and experience while maintaining personal autonomy and creative independence. But humanity's contribution once again redefined what was possible. They created a world where the primary currency was innovation. The basic idea, Timothy Chen explained to the panel of judges, is that instead of using money or resources or political power as the basis for social organization, you use creativity and problem-solving as the measure of value. The human test world had become a society where citizens advanced not by accumulating wealth or political influence, but by contributing solutions to problems that improved everyone's quality of life. Education was focused not on memorizing information, but on developing the ability to identify challenges and create innovations. Government functioned not by making laws but by facilitating competitions that channeled individual ambition toward collective benefit. Every person becomes an inventor. Every problem becomes an opportunity, and every solution becomes a stepping stone to more interesting challenges. Emma Rodriguez added. Plus, it's way more fun than any other economic system anyone's tried. The results spoke for themselves. In 2 years, the human test world had achieved technological advancement rates that exceeded anything in galactic history. Social satisfaction indices that eliminated every form of systemic conflict, and cultural innovation that produced art, music, and literature that moved beings to tears across species barriers. But more importantly, they had created a society that other species wanted to emulate rather than simply admire. The Human Model Chief Evaluation Officer, Narthik announced to the assembled representatives, has been selected as the winner of the 5th annual competition. However, the evaluation committee wishes to note that every submitted model contained innovations that exceeded our expectations. The true victory belongs not to any individual species, but to the collaborative process that made such advancement possible. The announcement was met with applause that transcended species, language, and cultural barriers. But it was what happened next that truly demonstrated how completely the galaxy had transformed. Instead of celebrating their victory, humanity immediately began working with other species to incorporate the best elements of every submitted civilization model into a unified framework that could be adapted by any society according to their specific needs and capabilities. The thing is, Emma Rodriguez explained to the post-competition planning committee, winning is only fun if it makes everyone else want to play better next time. If you just prove you're better than everyone else, all you've done is demonstrate that the competition wasn't challenging enough. She activated a holographic display that showed integration possibilities between different civilization models. But if you can take the best parts of what everyone created and combine them into something that makes all of us better than any of us could be individually, that's when it gets interesting. The Collaborative Civilization Project became the largest joint undertaking in galactic history, 43 species working together to create not a single perfect society, but a framework that allowed every world to become the best version of what its inhabitants chose to be. The project took 5 years. The results changed everything. By the end of the 7th year after humanity's first contact with the Dominion, galactic civilization had evolved into something that bore no resemblance to what had existed before. Wars had become extinct not because they were forbidden, but because the competitive alternatives were more engaging and rewarding. Resource conflicts had disappeared not because resources were unlimited, but because the new economic models made waste inefficient and innovation profitable. But most importantly, every species had discovered capabilities they had never known they possessed, driven by competition that made everyone stronger rather than reducing others to weakness. Fleet Commander Zephyros, now Director General of the Interstellar Competition Commission, stood in the observation deck of Competition Station Prime, looking out at a view that would have been incomprehensible to the being he had been 8 years earlier. 17 different architectural styles created a harmony that pleased beings whose aesthetic preferences had evolved under different suns. 43 species worked together on projects that challenged the combined capabilities of galactic civilization. Children from dozens of worlds played games that prepared them for challenges that their parents couldn't have imagined. Sir, Submander Lyrian approached, her serpentine form now decorated with the badges of achievement she had earned in 7 different competitive disciplines. The results from the 8th annual competition are ready for review. What was the challenge this year? Design something impossible. Zephyros turned to look at her, his forearms spreading in the gesture of amazed inquiry that had replaced his old military postures. And the results? Every team succeeded, sir. But the human entry, Lyrian's form coiled with excitement. The human entry has created something that defies analysis. Show me. The display activated to show Emma Rodriguez, now 18 years old and recognized as the most innovative thinker in galactic history. She stood before the judging committee with the confident smile that had become her trademark. We decided that the most impossible thing we could create, her recorded voice explained, would be a challenge that makes itself more challenging every time someone succeeds at it. The display shifted to show Timothy Chen's latest engineering marvel, a device that appeared to be simultaneously a game, a learning system, and a problem-solving framework. It's called the Infinite Challenge Generator. Timothy's presentation continued. Every time someone solves a problem using the system, it analyzes their solution and creates new problems that are specifically designed to push their capabilities just beyond what they proved they could handle. But more than that, Emma added, it shares those solutions across the network, so every time anyone gets better at anything, everyone gets access to challenges that help them develop similar capabilities. Zephyros stared at the display, understanding dawning like sunrise over an alien world. They've created, he whispered, a system for infinite improvement. Yes, sir, a challenge that ensures no one ever stops growing, no one ever reaches the limits of their potential, and no one ever runs out of interesting problems to solve. And it works? Sir, we've tested it across 17 different species. The improvement rates are, Lyrian's form trembled with the magnitude of the data. The improvement rates are exponential, not linear, not logarithmic. Everyone who uses the system becomes measurably better at everything they attempt, continuously, without limit. Zephyros felt something that transcended his military experience, his administrative duties, and his role as a leader of galactic civilization. He felt gratitude. 8 years ago, the Dominion had approached a primitive planet with the intention of adding another conquered territory to their empire. Instead, they had encountered a species that had taught them that the greatest victory wasn't defeating opponents. It was creating challenges that made everyone stronger. Signal the human delegation, he said finally. Inform them that the Infinite Challenge Generator has been selected as the winner of the 8th annual competition. And, he paused, considering the full implications of what humanity had created, and inform them that we would like to formally request their assistance in implementing galactic deployment of the system. Sir, if we're going to keep growing, Zephyros said, looking out at a galaxy that had transformed beyond recognition, we're going to need challenges that grow with us. The implementation of the Infinite Challenge Generator across galactic civilization marked the beginning of what historians would later call the Age of Endless Possibility. Within a single generation, the rate of advancement accelerated to levels that made the previous 7,000 years of galactic history seem like a brief pause between more interesting developments. Technologies that had been theoretical became practical. Problems that had seemed intractable became solved. Challenges that had appeared impossible became the foundation for even more interesting challenges. But the most significant change was psychological. Every being in galactic civilization now lived with the knowledge that they could become better than they were, that there was always another level of capability to reach, always another problem to solve, always another way to grow. Failure became a learning experience rather than a source of shame. Competition became collaboration in the pursuit of mutual advancement. Victory became the opportunity to face more interesting challenges. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to treat the transformation of galactic civilization with the same casual confidence they had brought to everything else. As if turning the entire galaxy into an infinite game of mutual improvement was just another interesting problem to solve. Emma Rodriguez, now 25 and serving as the director of Infinite Challenge Development, sat in her office aboard Competition Station Ultimate, the newest and largest facility in the ever-expanding network of competitive cooperation centers. Through her windows, she could see something that would have been unimaginable when she was 12 years old. A galaxy where every world was engaged in the joyful pursuit of becoming better than it had been, where every species competed not to dominate others but to inspire everyone to reach new levels of capability. Her communicator chimed with an incoming transmission from Timothy Chen, now working on what he described as challenges that challenge the concept of challenge itself from a research facility in the Andromeda Galaxy. Emma. His voice carried the excitement that had never dimmed since the day he built his first robot out of kitchen appliances. You need to see what we've discovered out here. What kind of discovery? We've found another galaxy with intelligent life. 47 different species, organized into what appears to be a military conquest hierarchy. They've been doing the same expansion through domination thing for about 12,000 years. Emma grinned. The same expression that had convinced the most powerful military force in their own galaxy to abandon conquest in favor of friendly competition. And they just detected our presence. They're dispatching what appears to be an invasion fleet. How big? About 3 times the size of the original Dominion fleet that showed up at Earth. Emma leaned back in her chair, contemplating the delicious irony of the situation. Humanity had accidentally transformed one galaxy by treating invasion as an opportunity for competition. Now they had the chance to see if their approach could work on an even larger scale. Tim, she said finally, do you think they'd be interested in a friendly wager? Oh, I think they're going to hate the idea at first, but once they see what they could become instead of what they've been. Yeah, Emma agreed. Already making plans for the most ambitious competition in galactic history. I think they're going to love it. Outside her window, the lights of 1,000 worlds twinkled with the activities of beings who had discovered that the greatest victory wasn't conquering others. It was creating opportunities for everyone to exceed what they thought possible. And somewhere in the space between galaxies, another fleet of conquerors was about to learn that humanity's approach to warfare was the most effective weapon ever devised. Not because it destroyed enemies, because it turned enemies into friends who were excited about becoming better than they used to be. The invasion was coming. Emma Rodriguez couldn't wait. 10 years later, the Intergalactic Competition Commission encompassed 4 galaxies, managed challenges involving over 3,000 species, and had transformed the concept of advancement from a zero-sum game into an infinite-sum celebration of universal potential. The most recent competition, Design a Challenge That Challenges the Challenge of Designing Challenges, had resulted in innovations that made the Infinite Challenge Generator look like a child's toy. But more importantly, it had produced something unprecedented in cosmic history. A universe where every form of intelligent life was actively engaged in helping every other form of intelligent life become the best version of what they could be. Wars had become extinct across 4 galaxies not through force or legislation, but because beings had discovered more interesting ways to spend their time. Scarcity had become irrelevant not because resources were unlimited, but because the new competitive frameworks made waste inefficient and innovation infinitely renewable. Conflict had evolved from destructive opposition to creative tension that drove everyone involved toward higher levels of capability. And at the heart of it all, humanity continued to approach the transformation of cosmic civilization with the same attitude they had brought to every other impossible challenge. Treat it like a game, make it fun for everyone involved, and never accept limitations that prevent anyone from becoming better than they used to be. Emma Rodriguez, now 35 and recognized as the architect of intergalactic competitive cooperation, stood before the assembled representatives of 3,000 species, preparing to announce the next phase of development. "We've proven," she said, her voice carrying to beings whose forms of consciousness spanned every conceivable variation of intelligence, "that competition can make everyone stronger instead of making some people weaker. We've demonstrated that challenges can be designed to help everyone grow rather than to eliminate those who can't keep up." She paused, looking out at an audience that represented the greatest gathering of cooperative competitors in cosmic history. "But now we face our biggest challenge yet." The assembly fell silent, representatives from 4 galaxies focusing their attention on the human who had taught the universe that the most impossible problems made the most interesting games. "We've run out of enemies to turn into friends," Emma continued, her grin carrying the same confidence that had convinced the Dominion to abandon conquest. "So we're going to have to get creative about finding new challenges." Timothy Chen's voice came through the communication array from his research station in the Magellanic Clouds. "Actually, Emma, I might have found our next challenge." "What is it?" "Remember how we solved the problem of infinite improvement by creating challenges that get harder as we get better at solving them?" "Yeah. Well, I've been working on something that goes beyond that. Instead of challenges that scale with our capabilities, I've designed challenges that scale with our imagination." The implications hit Emma like a physical force. "Tim," she said slowly, "are you telling me you've created challenges that become more challenging as we become better at creating challenges?" "That's the basic idea. But it goes deeper than that. These challenges don't just respond to what we can do, they respond to what we can dream of being able to do. They turn our wildest impossibilities into tomorrow's warm-up exercises." Emma Rodriguez looked out at 3,000 species, who had learned to treat the defense of their civilizations as opportunities for friendly competition, who had discovered that the greatest victory was helping opponents become strong enough to provide better challenges. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings whose forms of address don't translate into English," she announced, "I think we just found our next impossible problem to solve." The response was immediate and universal. Enthusiastic applause from beings who had learned that the most impossible challenges made the most rewarding games. Somewhere in the vast reaches of space, new forms of intelligence were evolving, new civilizations were emerging, new challenges were waiting to be discovered. And at the heart of the greatest cooperative competition in cosmic history, humanity continued to do what they had always done best: turn every impossibility into an opportunity for everyone to become better than they used to be. The universe had become the ultimate game, and everybody was winning.